All right. Welcome to another episode of The Learning Lever. I'm Ryan Richardson, of course, and this week we have Bryan Lodigiani, who is one of our instructors and, more importantly, a professional in the sports industry for quite some time. I think 12 plus 13 years now, Bryan, if
Yes,
that's
that's
not
right.
correct.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about a lot of good stuff here today. But before we do that, before we get into the state of the business, how to get into the business, how you got into the business, give everyone a little background of where you are now. I'll let you kind of give your own intro, what you're doing today, what your role is, where you're located, and then we'll talk about kind of the state of affairs in the industry.
That sounds great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. Bryan Lodigiani, I'm the Vice President of Business Strategy and Analytics down for Tepper Sports and Entertainment down here in Charlotte. So we're the parent company of the Carolina Panthers and Charlotte FC and also the Bank of America Stadium. I can't believe it, but I'm in our sixth season with the
Wow.
Panthers, so about 5.5 years. We started right at the start of COVID. March 2020 was when the team started, so not a great time to start in the live events business. But we were our first business strategy and analytics team for the organization after Dave and Nicole Tepper bought the team in 2018. And we can certainly talk about what our team does and how we help the organization. But the way we talk about it internally is we have two things. We help enable our sales and service team to accelerate growth and find new
Sure.
ways to grow. And then also help the organization with longer term strategic things like renovation and new projects that are out there. Prior to Tepper Sports, I was actually up in Maryland at Under Armour for about 6 years. So held a number of operating roles there on the strategy side, but then also started a pricing group. And believe it or not, I didn't. I started my career pretty far away from sports. I was an economics major at Middlebury College, where I played football and baseball, but started in healthcare banking in New York
Okay.
City. Not very close to sports, but then went to business school for 2 years up at Dartmouth, and went into management consulting for 4 years, where I did a lot of retail and consumer products work, and then got the itch to get into sports.
That's so much. And what's amazing is it fits in well with what we're going to talk about today, right? Like the reality is you work for not a singular team or singular entity, which has been maybe the past or traditional business role. And you didn't have the traditional start in sales and work your way up through the system of a team. You kind of came in
Right.
through a different avenue, if you will, that's becoming more popular, but it certainly wasn't the standard when you did it. Walk us through like maybe a little bit about your pathway into sports, knowing that it was a little bit less past traditional, maybe a little bit more traditional now, if we're being honest, but that, and also a little bit about how that should be realized today. Like what's different that started then that is different now, if you will.
Yeah, flashback to when I was leaving management consulting. So this was around 2013, and I started to think about what else I wanted to do. And as I mentioned, I grew up a big sports fan, played football and baseball, and I said, "Hey, let me try my hand at sports." And thought I'd say, "Oh, I'll go work for a team." And might be dating myself here a little bit, but I grew up a big baseball fan, and
Who's
actually
the
wrote
team?
wrote letters to a Red Sox fan from
Okay.
Boston.
I
I
figured.
don't know how that's gonna go over, but, I
Part of who
actually
you
wrote.
are.
Yeah, that's right. Um, I sent a lot of letters out to baseball teams, and, the 30 baseball teams out there. I actually got some good responses back, but a lot of the responses back I got, they struggled to find a place for me in a sports team organization, because at the time, I was a, management consultant with an MBA and a former banker. And they looked at my background and said, "Well, you don't sell tickets, you don't do partnerships, you don't do marketing." I think it was like, "Hey, you can come down to Texas and sell some single game tickets." But at that point in my career, I was 10 years in and just couldn't do that. So I said, "How do I get myself close to sports?" And
Yeah.
I looked more of a sports adjacent opportunity at Under Armour. They were actually growing their retail business, which fit in well with some of the work I was doing consulting. And so got my foot in the door on the brand side of sports for about 6 years. And just about a sign of the times. So that was 2013 or 14 when I was thinking about sports and went to Under Armour. And then when I was leaving Under Armour in 2019 or so, I said I wanted to try the team side again. And this was a year after Dave and Nicole Tepper bought the team here, and started talking to them. And There's this, hey, we want to think differently on the business side, bring some
Sure.
data and insights into how we make decisions. And I say that because even in that 5 or 6 year time frame, you started to see this evolution towards we want to think more thoughtfully on the business side and make smarter decisions. There's a lot of people at these sports teams that have a plethora of experience, like Ryan, just like you were talking about, people that started out as intern and they've
Yeah,
worked
yeah,
for
yeah.
20 years. What we said is we can come in, provide another set of eyes or different perspective. If they're providing the art, we're providing the science, and the best answer is somewhere in the middle, and we can provide a
That's
new
good.
perspective. And so that really resonated with the team down here in Charlotte. And again, we said we can also help on the strategy side as well. And so again, like that was 5 years ago, and now you see it, and even more so, you're seeing it more and more common, whether it's these owners paying crazy amounts for these teams, billions of dollars. You're starting to see private equity money coming in. They're
Sure.
just looking for people to come in and think differently.
Well, it does track with what we've had with some of our other guests, right? Like this idea that the analytics, the business strategy analytics side of the sports industry has been on an uptick since, call it 2012. Maybe you go farther back, maybe you go a little further forward, but it's been growing at a steady clip. So you look at 2012 to 2018, 19 to 2025. And if there is one area that seems to be growing within teams, it is the strategy, it is the analytics, it is the business consultant roles that are growing at the end of the day. That's fostered by consolidation in the industry as well and expansion in what people are doing. What do you think the balance is of that right now for how many people are going to be coming from the outside versus coming up through the organizations as the complexity and size grows?
I think it's a mix. Like when we think about growing our team, there's a little bit of institutional knowledge depending on the role that would be best served by people that are familiar with terms in the industry, the ticketing business or the
Sure.
partnership business. And so there's some that have that sort of and I'd say, maybe they're 3 to 4 years out of school. They've got enough of the industry knowledge, but they're
Yeah.
also, they also are open to new ways of thinking that we have on our team. Then there's others that are coming in that, just provide a different perspective. Like you see in sports right now, technology becoming a bigger and bigger piece of like what
Yeah.
teams are trying to do, both from the fan experience side, but also the partnership side. So people with that tech experience, marketing, like new ways to market, especially on the digital marketing side. There's a lot of ways that sports teams can learn from others in the industry.
I think it makes sense. It kind of makes me think like, what is the description now of a sports organization? Like when you think about, look, even 2 years ago when I started, 3 years ago when I started learning about this, it was like every organization was very different. Some were more family oriented, some were more corporation like, some were conglomerates. That's only become more complex in the last few years. When you describe the quote unquote stereotypical sports organization, what comes to mind? Like, how would you describe that, knowing that it's a bit of an impossible task? But what does that look like right now in 2025?
Well, I think you're right. I think there's different, call them like archetypes of sports
Okay.
organizations where some are just very single property, essentially putting a good product on the field, enough investment on the business side. The ones that are really interesting though are the ones that the multi-property, the
Yeah.
ones that really see it as a business, almost an entertainment company that supports sports organizations. And that's one thing we always talk about of like, especially younger folks in the industry when they say, "Hey, I'm interested to get on the team side, where should I go?" And that was you want to get to those organizations that are multi-property, tons of growth potential. When I look back on my career, like in the decision to come down here to Charlotte, like that was the reason why. Because
Yeah.
in the fall of 2019, like I can still remember the letterhead on my offer letter. It was just the Carolina Panthers. We didn't have a
Wow.
soccer team, but the when I talked to them, it was a story of growth, right? It was, hey, we're gonna start a soccer team, we're gonna renovate the stadium, we've got interesting partnership deals that are happening, we're gonna do some development around the stadium. Those are the types of organizations that you want to grow into, and they appreciate those outside in perspectives that we were just talking about. the technology folks, the marketing folks, the business strategy folks can really bring.
I love it, and so true. I mean, it is the conversation I've had of the complexity of what those extended properties are, what those business extensions are, is getting even more interesting, to be quite honest.
Well, it's funny too that like we talk about this and you say, well, what type of sports organization do you want to be? Do you want to be sort of a single property organization, or these properties like think about like Fenway Sports Groups or the Dallas
Yeah,
Cowboys or Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. Everybody
absolutely.
wants to be that, but in order to do that, it requires a lot of change internally. Investment in people, investment in process. It's very complex to do that. So it's easy to kind of see all these great things on the top line, but from an organization perspective, you got to be set up to do that and make some serious investments if that's the direction you want to head in.
Well, yeah, it's not like you're growing franchises of a burger joint. Like, they're not the same.
Right.
Each one of those
Right.
things is a new whole business, a new whole, like, yeah, they're related. Yeah, there's carryover skills, knowledge, and all that, but it's a different thing. They're not apples to apples at any level. Okay, let's look at it this way. If we're looking at, I want to get to one other concept that you have a unique view in, which is the timeline of what you're looking at on the work you're doing today. It's not for tomorrow, it's not for yesterday. It's looking forward. But I'd love to tie that into, how do those that are looking to get into the industry, how do they start to understand that they're not hiring for a job to be done on Monday through Friday for the next 3 weeks necessarily, but something larger in scale, knowing that there is something that needs to be done Monday through Friday? Like, how do you put those two things together when you're looking at breaking into or growing your career in the industry?
Yeah, the way that we talk about our team is there's analytics and then there's strategy. And so when you think about analytics, that's where a lot of these teams start, right? Like help us grow our current ticketing business, our current partnership
Yep.
business, be smarter in, current marketing. I would say the way to think about it is that's much more near term. And so we're working in real time on season ticket pricing or promotional calendars or partnership lead generation, and that's where a lot of these teams start. And
Okay.
we're working closely with the partnership ticketing marketing teams on those initiatives. But then, especially as mentioned, like these more innovative, progressive organizations of we've got to think beyond the next 12 months and we got to think about the
Yeah.
next 3 to 5 years. And it's funny, Ryan, like being in the sports industry for on the team side for 6 years, you can see that there's such a rhythm to the season that people can get lost and just you get in the flow of things and
Yeah.
you put your head up and 5 years later it's like, wow, like what have we really advanced? And because everybody's so focused on the next game, the next match, the next event, and there's not enough mind share that can go to those other things that are out there. And so that's the other part of our team. I call it like your traditional corporate strategy arm, where we're
Yeah.
working on, or we've got a big renovation happening here. What do we want our renovation to look like? What's the concepts we want to put in? The use of artificial intelligence in our business. Should we be thinking about things like loyalty and fan engagement platforms? There's nobody here. They don't have the time to think about those things. And so it's our job to one, help the current business grow faster and and more successfully, but then also be sort of that arm or that eye towards the future to think about what are those things so we're not caught flat-footed 5 years from now when those trends have sort of passed us by.
It's very relatable to what I've been kind of talking with a lot of the teams, is we're talking about learning and like how you can help your employees, your staff learn to do the next job. And there's always, we're busy with this. It's the off season. It's not the off
Yep.
season. There is no off
Yeah.
season. We got to do this. And it's like, there's no time. We're overworked. It's like, there is that manic kind of just passage of time where you can't evolve and change if you're just sustaining all
Correct.
the time. Those organizations, and thankfully a lot of them have started to take that step back and go, okay, there is, like you say, the analytical short term, this is what we're doing, and then like, what is this strategy piece that's longer term? And it's great to hear you talking about it, because obviously that's where so many of our operating experts are coming from. They've been doing this a long time. They see the opportunity to improve, but it takes those tough steps, those tough decisions, those mindful kind of moments to say, hey, we've got to rethink X, Y, or Z. for 2, 3, 4 years down the road versus 2, 3 games down the road when both are very, very important, very, very important at the end of the day.
And we're lucky enough that we have a leadership team here that recognizes that. And
Yes.
even though amongst the chaos of the seasons, like you said, there's no off seasons where the MLS goes from February to December, and the NFL is incredible. They've created a year-round business in and of itself. But we take time every year to take a step back and look at our goals and say, where are we going? Are we on the right track? Do we need to pivot? What's most important this year? And let's stay focused on the big drivers before
Yeah.
diving into the weeds of the day to days and the weeks to weeks.
That comes through. Like, that comes through when I've talked to a lot of organizations in the last years. It really does come through, those organizations that are taking those steps and those that are struggling with it. And so it's nice to hear the ones that are making the progress are being successful with it, because it is the right approach, I think, at least from my, vantage point, of course.
Well, I also think, especially as you get to this, we're talking about these multi-property, more progressive organizations, and just to the point around investments and new ways of working. Because when I came in, it was coming off of just the Panthers, right? And the
Yeah.
NFL is 10 games a year. Maybe you have a couple college games. It's less tickets to sell, but stack on that an MLS team, stack on that more events at the stadium, stack on that a renovation. It just gets more complex as a business, and you need to take that time, kind of like,
Yeah.
take a few steps back to speed up a little bit. Just because if you're
So
not, it's
true.
just going to be way too chaotic. And maybe you can get away with it when you're a single NFL team for a time, but no way can you do it once you get into those more progressive, innovative companies.
And you can't do it efficiently, and you sure as heck can't do it at a level of excellence that is what you're striving for in this industry, for sure. There is a level of excellence that people are looking for in the sports industry, which I've always appreciated. And doesn't mean they're all getting there necessarily, but they are looking for it. They are striving for it. Sometimes they're paying for it, but
Yeah.
that's the reality of what we're looking at. Okay, let's switch gears a teeny bit, because I would be remiss if we didn't talk about fan experience and the fan engagement of the future and what you're doing, whether that's data on the fan, whether that's what the fan actually experiences from the organization as a whole, or even what the fan experiences in individual channels or events. When you think about fans and your business now, how does the priority break down, or how does your approach kind of sit, knowing that you do have a lot of different angles these days?
Yeah, I think first thing is listening to the fan is one of our 5 key pillars as an organization, and making sure there's a great fan experience. So one of the first things we did, there's some work done at the league levels here around
Sure.
surveying fans. So as season ticket members, but also events, we do a lot of our own research, customer research and fan research, both on game days and outside of game days to understand what's most important. Are there pain points? What can we improve? And work closely with our operations team on that. So there's some real time feedback. Like as an event happens, we'll survey fans. We'll work with our operations team and what can we adjust really during that time. But there is a limit to what you can do given your current building. And we're lucky enough right now. We're in this moment of having this renovation that
Yeah.
we're doing where typically, Ryan, like a lot of it is thinking about new seating concepts and new facades on the building. We're taking it as an opportunity to also reimagine the fan experience and say, what's the fan going to want in 5 years, both on like what we're hearing today, but also where trends are going, where we're seeing
Yeah, yeah,
in
of course.
QSRs and hotels and hospitalities and airports, things like that. And, because if we design for today, it's going to be outdated by, 2030 when we open this thing. So we're doing a lot of work, thinking about like, how do we evolve that fan experience? And the way that we sort of frame it is, the at home experience is just getting better and better, right? It's, you got the
Yeah.
64-inch TVs and red zones and, got your fantasy teams up and everything. It's what's the reason why somebody's going to get up off their couch in 5 years and come to the stadium? Like, what are the reasons? How do we make it seamless, more frictionless, more personalized for them to make it worthwhile? And so we're putting a lot of thought into that. And so we've got this unique opportunity just in front of us with this renovation to really rethink that.
I love it. I got a question for you. This may be a little bit off the traditional personalization kind of kick, which is very popular and very important. How do you think about the collaborative experience of coming together to the stadium? The personalization can go almost all the way down to my iPhone if I want, but
Yeah, yeah.
the thing you have on the collaborative side of it in the stadium, like how have you looked at that aspect of the fan experience for the future?
Yeah, I think like two things on that is you don't want to make it too digital and anonymous for fans where they're just staring at their phones the entire
Fair.
experience. Like, we talk about how do we add that human touch into things,
Yeah.
into the experience where it's digital, but also something that, a lot of the team here prides itself on is, sort of that Southern hospitality, if you will, and that, personal
Nice. I
touch
like that.
for the fans. And so not losing that, right? And, getting
Yeah.
too divorced from that piece. But just to your point too around, the collaboration piece and, how do we create some more communal spaces for people to gather, in and around the stadium and thinking about that? Because that's what it's, really all about essentially is,
For
you just
sure.
want to get people in and that's actually a big piece of, what we're thinking of here of, creating more of those spaces for people just to gather and naturally have get-togethers outside of all the personalization things like that because that's a big piece of the experience for sure.
Without a doubt. One of my favorites, of course. Okay, switching gears another time. We're going to keep switching gears because there's so much to
Yeah.
cover. But talk to me about one of your key, I want to say learning experiences, like something you learned, but I want to keep it out of like the grade school, the high school, the college. Like in your professional career, have you ever had something or what have you had that is been learning significant, whether it be a training program, whether it be a person or a role? What worked for you in the day-to-day learning of doing your job outside of traditional education?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest learnings I had that just comes to mind here was when I started uh,
Okay.
here at Tepper Sports. So just to set the scene a little bit, it was the start of COVID, starting a new group here.
Okay.
Didn't have any team experience and had to do it virtually, right? And so came in
Okay.
here and, wanted to say, "Okay, I wanna come in and have an impact right away," and, started to really think about, like, areas I could think about from the ticketing perspective and partnership, and came in with a lot of recommendations to the business. And, initially, like a group like ours, like we're supposed to be seen as collaborators and partners to the business. And, like one of the learnings that I had was came in a little bit too aggressive to some of our partners, right? The ticketing business, the partnership business. And I remember having like a moment with our head of ticketing of like, hey, just got to learn the business. I made a recommendation on season ticket pricing and, he's like, you just don't know the business well enough. And so didn't get off to the best start with our ticketing team here and sort of changed my approach and said, you know
Okay.
what, I'm going to listen to, I'm going to try and solve the problems that are most important to them. And so spent the summer really, helping them, not me coming and saying like, here are my recommendations, but how can I help you guys? Right. And so,
Smart.
built that relationship with them and just helping them solve. It's like trying to become like a true business partner essentially. And so, through the summer and fall of that first year, just building that trust. And then, fast forward to the winter, spring, we're back into, ticket pricings, recommendations again. Like Ryan literally made the same recommendation I did a year before. And it was like, great, that sounds great. Let's do that. That's right on point. So it just like we talk about like we often get asked on our team and like as we're interviewing people, what's somebody going to be successful? Like what are the skill sets they need? And we talk about, some of the technical skill sets like SQL and Tableau,
Sure.
Python, and now it's, artificial intelligence. How do we use that in our business? But we talk about just as, if not more important, is like, can you sit across from a business partner, like somebody in ticketing or partnerships, understand like what they're trying to solve, bring it back, create a solution, and then present it back in a way that they understand it and, kind of have that ability. Cause like you can have the best answer in the world, but if your business partner doesn't believe it, it's not going anywhere.
Look, it's why I love working with you, man. I mean, you put the relationship at the front. If the relationship's solid, a lot can be done. If the relationship's in doubt, it's easy to dismiss a
Yeah,
great idea as maybe you don't know it, but still a great idea. It doesn't have to be a bad idea just because you don't know the business. But without the trust, without the relationship, without the history, really hard for someone to take a leap of faith on that. And clearly it worked going back to him a year later and getting the buy-in.
yeah,
Uh, it's smart. And again, I think that's a pretty common thing, right? Everybody wants to be it happens even in interviews these days. Like, here's what I would do. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I'm good. And you want to put your best foot forward, but the reality is, your best foot is how do you help to start? And it goes back to a good old, walk before you run type of thing. But we love people that want to run when you're getting hired, but then when you're in the door, you're like, whoa, slow down a little bit. Hold on a minute.
exactly,
Get to
exactly.
know all of us, and we've been here 20 years, and then you start worried about stepping on toes, and it's a whole other set of drama things we got to manage.
It's like, have you ever seen in like Wolf of Wall Street the "Sell me this pen" bit?
Yeah,
It's basically you got to understand if like what their issues are, problems are before you start selling a pen. So
without a doubt. Well, and again, that's the thing we talked about when we started this discussion. The organizations are going through change, and change is hard, and they're going through growth. And there's even fear. Am I going to be relevant in a year in this industry for a lot of different folks? And so now you're coming in as a new hire saying, hey, let's switch everything you've been doing for 20 years because it'll make more sense. Whoa, whoa, hold on, hold
yeah,
on. I want my legacy. I like my legacy. But I mean, it's necessary. And we're moving faster and faster. Like, it's not slowing down, it's only accelerating. So the quicker people can make those relationship kind of connections and build that trust, the faster they can all move collaboratively moving forward.
exactly.
Okay, Brian, we got a couple things here. Final thing. We're very close. We're coming in the home stretch here. I always like to bring this back to something a little more pop culture, a little bit more outside of sports. Are you a movie, TV, or reader, or all the above? What do we like here? Are we movies, TV, reading? What's your or music? What's your social kind of engagement when you get outside of work?
I'd probably do TV or reading.
Okay, so we think about great shows have great characters that have great challenges. Great books have great characters, nonfiction aside. What is a book series episode character that you've learned something from, or that you've seen go through a journey that has given you pause, like, I like the way that happens, or I like the way that character handled that, or that's something I'm going to take back to my life? This is a tricky one, so I'll give you a little pause. It's pretty tough to put people on the spot.
In a
A
TV or
show, a
movie,
character, it could be a movie too. Like, I got tons of examples I've answered in different episodes, but like movie, character, book, where you've learned something, because learning's all around. This is all about learning. We forget we're learning every time we step out in the world, and movies, TV shows, songs, they are very much packed with lessons, and it's nice to call them out once in a while.
let me think about that one for a
Take
second.
a minute. Yeah. I'll give you one that I've used in the past, which is I always love the Tommy Boy scene when Tommy Boy is, if Chris Farley, he's getting explained about authentic selling. Like, he's trying to sell, he's trying too hard, never sells, and then he's in the diner with his head all beat up from the 2x4, and he's like, why can't you just sell naturally? Be yourself. Authentic selling works. It's like, authentic. My whole course on authentic public speaking is built on the idea that Tommy Boy is right. David Spade's right. You just be yourself and people will buy from you. So that's kind of example of something we're talking about.
Let me know if this hits for you.
Please.
And it's I read a lot of nonfiction
Love
actually,
it.
and I'm just in the middle of Atomic Habits by James Clear. And if you don't know his story, it's fascinating. It was he was sort of a non-successful high school baseball player, and he actually had an injury his sophomore year where he got in a coma and kind of impacted the rest of his high school career. And he ended up going to college and trying out for the baseball team, and kind of rose up through his college career. And his senior year, he had an incredible year. He was kind of MVP of the team, and um, you know, uh, was aimed to like the ESPN All Academic team, which was only 33 players do that. And
Wow.
he talks about like, I'm not telling you this to be like boastful, and like I didn't have like a super successful baseball career. I didn't go professional, but he's like, I was able to fulfill my potential. And the way I was able to
Oh,
do that
yeah.
was just through the power of the books around like Atomic Habits, and how do you take these small little habits every day and compound them and just have like really success. It's about consistency and small habits. every day. And so you just think about like that's one of the things, and there's tons of examples of people that talk about like the get 1% better every day mentality. But if you take that, you're always thinking about that, and just, if you end your day that way and saying like, what am I doing? What are my habits really helping me get there?
Yeah.
Like, and it's a little bit recency because it's something I'm reading right now, but when you said
Perfect.
that, it was a really good reminder of like, he's nobody's special, but, he was able to really fulfill his dream of being a successful college baseball player despite some adversity or in high school just by these, like, small habits. It wasn't anything, grand that happened along the way. It was just these small things that happened.
I actually love that, and I really like I'm just gonna hone in on one thing, the idea of him saying living up to his potential. I think there's a lot of people that I've talked to in the last 2 years that wanna get into sports that feel they have a lot of potential to provide an impact, to make an impact, and they're not able to get there because of maybe not making those small incremental steps and trying to get that big swing. Really good example of what we're talking about here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Brian, first of all, thank
Thank
you as
you.
always. Any final thoughts or any final things you want to say out there to folks that are listening to us talk a little bit about learning and or the industry of sports these days?
I would say just, you often get like questions on, what advice would I give to
Always, yes.
somebody, who's interested in getting into sports? And I would just say, the one of the things that surprised me about sports is how small and collaborative this industry is, and how willing people
Yeah,
are to, pick up the phone and talk. And so the point number one is just continue to network, get to know people, and make sure that, you're reaching out. You'd be surprised at, the people that you reach out to, cold emails or LinkedIn's, they'll respond, and you'll get to know them. Point two is just learn about the industry as much as you can. So when you have those conversations, the trends that are happening in sports. The people when they sort of mention a name, the SEC commissioner. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that from that
yeah.
that whether it's podcasts or things like sports business journals, front office sports, Sportico. There's tons of things that are out there where it doesn't take that long, an hour or two a week, just to understand like what are sports executives really thinking about in the industry. And the third thing is, especially people early in their career, don't think you need to start right away in sports and you'll never get into sports. And that's something we talk about a lot. Is you hear the journeys. I'm sure, Ryan, people on your podcast tell your journey, and
Sure,
it's
sure.
always this windy road. And so don't get too discouraged. And we talked about that as these sports organizations evolve, they're going to need people that are not from sports. And, you can certainly, learn something else and sort of apply that to sports and just find that common thread, in your career.
I look, you've said it all, and it's great advice, and it's very timely advice. The complexity facing the business of sport, the amount of skills, the diversity of what every team or organization needs is only going to increase over time. Thank you so much for being an operating expert, for teaching a class for us, and more importantly, for being a guest here today on the Learning Lever. We look forward to next talks. And again, anyone out there next week, I don't know who we got. You'll have to stay tuned to see. But thank you again, Brian, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. I loved it.
If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening to the Learning Lever.